All right, let's transition and focus now on imperialism in India with the creation of the British Raj. Raj, of course, meaning king or kingdom. So, starting way back in the 16 and 1700s, we know that the British East India Company had been, setting up trading posts on the coasts of India. And they would, of course, trade with India and become very profitable. But after the 7 Years' War, when they kick out the French, and the French are removed then as a threat or as a competitor, we see that the British are going to increase their possession, their control over India. And there's several ways of doing this. And one of the ways they do is through simple bribery. So they would bribe local remember, because India, even though India was a empire with the Mughal Empire, a lot of the local rulers, right, which were like Hindu princes and stuff, they had a lot of individual power. So the British East India Company would make individual treaties with these local rulers, and in a sense, it was kind of like bribing them, or they would or hire one kingdom or one princedom to fight against another. So to kind of like the idea of divide and conquer, right? Dividing the Hindus versus the Muslims, dividing one princedom versus another, dividing the people versus the emperor or the dynasty of the Mughals. So they kind of like use the local divisions within India, the political and religious divisions within India, to slowly and surely start, defeating their competition. And the end result is that as the Mughal Empire increasingly gets weaker and weaker and weaker, the British East India Company gained more strength. Now, one of the ways they were able to gain control over South Asia is that they had a large military force, and the British would have their soldiers there. They will have commanders and stuff, but most of the fighting that took place on behalf of the British East India Company would be done by Indian soldiers, native Indian soldiers called the sepoys. And these soldiers were hired, they were mercenaries, they were paid to fight, and they were hired and given quite a nice paycheck to fight against other Indians. And they would be armed with British weapons, so they would always have this advantage. And if they died, it would cost the British government very little. Now, the sepoys eventually are going to realize that they're being, manipulated, they're being used, and they're going to have a mutiny. They're going to have a rebellion against the British East India Company, against the British rulers, and basically the British bring in all their heavy soldiers, all their large military, to put down this rebellion, and the end result is that thousands and thousands of these sepoy soldiers are killed, and then the British government kind of extends or increases its direct control over the colony. So we have the creation of the British Raj, which is the colonial government that the British are going to set up to rule and to manage over its colony of India. Now, this is unique because this is going to be the first time in basically all of Indian history that all of India, north and south, are going to be completely dominated and ruled by one power, right? The Mughal Empire ruled most of India. The Sultanate of Delhi only ruled northern India. Before them, we had the Mauryans and the Gupta dynasties, and they ruled a big chunk as well. But never until the British came in was all of India ruled by one power. And this kind of shows us and demonstrates just the power of the British Empire. Because Britain was the first country in history to industrialize, they're going to have a big advantage in their colonial power. And they're going to have territories all over the world, right? And essentially, they're going to create the largest empire in world history. And there's this famous phrase when describing the British Empire where people say that the sun doesn't set on the British Empire, right? Because its territories were so widespread all over the earth that the sun simply doesn't set on it. So they have territories in North America, they have territories in the Caribbean, in South America, they have territories all over Africa, they have territories in India, and of course Oceania all the way over here. Here we see the first kind of use of the term Middle East, right? So China and Japan, that's the Far East, right? Because of course here we have Western Europe. And of course the midway point would be over here, and that's of course the Middle East. So that's where we see that term used. It is originally was created as a colonial term, as an imperialist term. So a lot of people don't like using the term Middle East because it kind of brings back the fact that most of the part of the world was under imperial control. Now, what are the British doing in India? In many ways, the British are going to help industrialize and modernize India to levels that they didn't experience before. So the British are going to invest a ton of money in construction of railroads and harbors and telegraph lines. Now, the British are going to claim that this is, to the benefit of the Indians, because, all these new technologies are absolutely beneficial. But in reality, it's more to kind of like maximize their profit, maximize their colonies, because the more infrastructure you have, right, the easier and cheaper it is to transport raw materials out and manufactured goods in. The more faster communication lines like telegraphs, the easier it is to control and control your colony to get communications from India all the way to Britain. The infrastructure of transportation will also allow the British to mobilize and move its military forces into any part of India as quickly as possible to meet any, to put down any type of rebellion. So yes, the British bring industrialization. Yes, they bring modernity, but it is not out of the goodness of their hearts. It is because it makes it easier for them to rule over India and any other colony, and to, of course, maximize their profits from these colonies, right? So again, this is the type of image that they wouldn't want you to see, because here we see this white guy reading some type of report, while you have all these Indian servants working probably for bare minimum wage and very little rights. So can you argue that India became more modernized? Yeah, but at what cost, right? Because again, they're being still controlled by the British. And again, the railroads is that the big selling point, right? The British are industrializing and modernizing India, but again, the railroads were more beneficial to the British than it was to the Indians. Now, the British are also going to, change the landscape of India. They're going to clear down a lot of forests to make more room for cash crops. Tea is going to be a big one. Coffee is going to be a big one. Of course, opium is going to be another big one. The Europeans are going to open up schools. Now, this is kind of unique because they're going to open up schools and they're going to enroll the upper class of Indian society. Right? They're going to enroll, the upper caste of Indian society. So you're going to have a lot of Indians attending European schools. So instead of learning about Hinduism or Islam, they're going to start studying Western ideas. They're going to start studying Enlightenment and scientific revolution and industrial revolution type of stuff. And therefore they're going to start gaining the same ideas, same knowledge, same Western-based education that we would have seen in Britain. Now, one step that the British took to modernize India was to ban the sati. Remember, the sati is that ceremonial sacrifice of a widow when her husband passes away, and this was a Indian practice. That had a Hindu practice that had been around for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years. The Muslim rulers had tried, the Mughal rulers had tried to stop it before, and they failed. But the British finally bring an end to it, and again claiming that this was a necessary step for modernization. What else? What else? What else? What else? All right. The brand Lipton tea, that was part of the British East India Company. It was founded. The tea that came, for this company, was in southern India, also in the island of Ceylon. Ceylon is what we call now Sri Lanka, is a little island off the coast of southern India. So Lipton tea, right? That's a British company, right? And it, made use of Indian labor, and of course, the people working on these tea plantations were paid very, very little. All right. So we mentioned before of the refocus of agriculture in India to benefit the British by growing and selling cash crops instead of food crops, and the kind of the negative side effect of this is starvation and famine. And we again the kind of most disturbing one would be the fact that 7 million people died thanks to the British. Right, this was a policy that the British did, and in fact, when these type of photographs were published in newspapers around the world, and people were saying, man, the British are messed up, the British kind of like refused to like send food supply, saying, hey, this is Mother Nature, this is natural selection, doing its magic. All right, so I'll leave you off with that messed up image and disturbing image of the British rule in India, and I'll see you next time for part 3.